We have already discussed the pros and cons of monohulls, the great benefits and issues with the twin-hull vessel, more known as a catamaran. But now it's time to talk about the trimaran and why it's way better than you think. Catamarans achieve great speed by joining two slender hulls, which reduces the waterplane area. Naval architects looked at the catamaran problem and asked a different question. What if you didn't fight the waves at all? Wave forces disturb anything that's near the water surface. For ships and boats, this depends on the hull, since it sits at the waterline. A wide waterplane means more wave action, so naval architects shrunk it even more. They took the catamaran and made two submarine-looking hulls, joined them together with connecting struts as narrow as possible. All the buoyancy went into deep submerged hulls, sitting below the surface where waves don't reach. Their first attempt to solve this issue was to create a SWATH, which stands for Small Waterplane Area Twin Hull. From above, it looks like a normal ship, or at most a catamaran. Large flat deck with plenty of working space. But below the waterline, it's almost invisible to the waves passing overhead. The result? Near perfect stability. A SWATH ship in rough seas barely moves. The deck stays level without rolling and pitching violently, while nearby vessels are getting thrown around. Just a smooth glide as the ship rises and falls with the swell. For research vessels, stability is essential because you have a lot of people on those vessels who are not sailors. They're not used to the sea, so they can easily get seasick and can't collect data. But, as everything in life, stability comes at a cost. SWATH ships are extremely weight sensitive. Those slender, submerged hulls don't have much reserve buoyancy. Add a few extra tons and the ship sinks noticeably lower. Also, ship engines typically sit astern in the lowest part of the hull. But if you have a narrow submarine-shaped hull, you have no space to place the engine room down there. Engines get mounted on the main deck instead, requiring complex shafting or diesel-electric systems to deliver power down to propellers in the hulls. The submerged hulls create more drag than a conventional ship, so they're either comparatively slow or require too much power. SWATH works brilliantly for its niche. Research vessels, pilot boats, offshore oil rig support. Anywhere you need a stable platform more than you need speed or cargo capacity. So far, we know catamarans are fast, but structurally weak and unstable in rough seas. SWATH ships are stable, but slow, expensive, and can't carry cargo. The next attempt to solve these was to add a third hull. One central hull with two smaller outriggers, called amas, sitting on either side. The center hull does the heavy lifting. It provides 90 to 95% of the buoyancy. The amas barely touch the water. They're not there to carry weight anyway. They're there for stability. Monohulls face a trade-off. You want a skinny hull for speed, for less resistance cutting through water, but you also want width for stability. You can't have both. Remember that a wide hull gives you stability because it increases the distance between your center of buoyancy and your center of gravity when the ship heels. The wider the hull, the more righting moment you get when the ship tilts. But wide hulls create more drag and increase fuel consumption. Trimarans solve this by separating those functions. The center hull stays narrow, cutting through the water with minimal resistance. The amas sit wide, far from the center line. In calm water, they barely touch the surface. No buoyancy yet. When the ship starts to heel due to wind, waves, or during turning, one ama begins to submerge. As the leeward ama goes deeper into the water, it generates buoyancy. That buoyancy force acts far from the center of the ship. A long lever arm equals a big righting moment. At the same time, the windward ama lifts slightly, reducing weight on that side. These two effects combine, and the ship resists rolling. The center hull stays near the rotation point, which means it's not contributing much to roll stability. It's just sitting there, carrying the load. The amas are doing the stabilizing work. This is why they are positioned far outboard. The farther they sit from the center line, the longer the lever arm. The longer the lever arm, the more righting moment they create for the same amount of buoyancy. It's efficient. That's why amas need to be positioned just correctly, and they don't need to be large. The center hull is long. This reduces pitching in waves, and they smooth out the ride. And because the center hull is narrow, it cuts straight through the waves instead of slamming into them. Less impact, less stress on the structure. Deck space is another advantage. Catamarans have a large gap between the hulls. That gap needs a strong structure to bridge it, which makes it expensive, heavy, and complicated. Trimarans have a much smaller gap. The cross-deck doesn't span unsupported as far, so less structural weight and simpler engineering. Plus, you still get a large working area on deck with storage space below in the centre hull. With this, you can carry moderate cargo. Still, not as much as a monohull, but more than a catamaran. The deadweight capacity sits somewhere in between. You can put heavy equipment on the cross-deck without overloading the structure. Cranes, helicopters, weapon systems. The shorter span handles it, which is why navies got interested. RV Triton was one of the first, the world's largest motor-powered trimaran with a length of 90 metres and beam of 22 metres. It was a technology demonstrator ship for the Royal Navy, to be used to quantify the structural and seakeeping performance of trimarans. Aker Arctic even looked at trimarans for icebreaking. The wide configuration could cut broader channels through ice using less power than a conventional icebreaker. But commercial shipping stayed with what it knew. Monohulls for cargo, catamarans for ferries, SWATH for research, and trimarans for specialised military roles. 4 different solutions to the same problem, but none of them replaced the monohull. So, where does that leave trimarans? Well, they're a hybrid, somewhere between a monohull and a catamaran. They offer the advantages of both: cargo capacity, deck space, stability, and efficiency. But again, whether they're the right option depends on what you're trying to do.